I always say that I never sang any style of music that I hadn't heard in my household growing up. I can't approach it with any kind of authenticity.
Before we go any further, here's something worth saying plainly. There is no verified account anywhere of a 78-year-old Linda Ronstadt sitting down and naming 7 musicians she hated. That story doesn't exist in any interview, memoir, or documentary she has ever given. What does exist is something better. A 5-decade career built on real collaborations, real creative disagreements, and one of the most unusual, genre-jumping catalogs in American music history. So instead of inventing a feud reel, let's tell you what actually happened. Because the true version of Linda Ronstadt's story is more interesting than any fabricated one could be. Linda Ronstadt was born in Tucson, Arizona, in 1946 and started singing with her siblings before she was a teenager. By the late 1960s, she'd moved to Los Angeles, joined a trio called the Stone Ponies, and scored a hit with different drum. From there, she went solo. And by the early 1970s, she was one of the most in-demand voices in a Los Angeles music scene that was about to change rock and roll forever. That scene included the Troubadour Club, a rotating cast of songwriters and session players, and a manager named John Boylan, who had a knack for spotting talent. It's in that world that the first and most famous chapter of her story begins, the birth of the Eagles. In early 1971, Ronstadt and Boylan needed a backing band for her upcoming tour behind the album Silk Purse. Boylan brought in a young drummer from Texas named Don Henley, who had been playing in a band called Shiloh, and a guitarist from Michigan named Glenn Frey, who'd been working in a duo called Long Branch Pennywhistle with songwriter J.D. Souther. Ronstadt rounded out the band with bassist Randy Meisner, who'd played in Rick Nelson's Stone Canyon Band, and guitarist Bernie Leadon, a veteran of the Flying Burrito Brothers. The 4 of them played exactly one show together as Ronstadt's backing band, a concert at Disneyland on July 12, 1971, in front of a crowd of graduating high schoolers who had no idea they were watching musical history in the making. During the tour that followed, Henley and Frey, who were rooming together to save money, discovered they wrote well together. Frey started calling Henley his secret weapon. When they told Ronstadt they wanted to break off and form their own band, she didn't just let them go. She actively helped make it happen. She said in interviews that when Frey told her his plan, she responded, "That's a great idea." She suggested Leadon join them because she liked his playing, and her producer John Boylan helped broker the introductions between everyone involved. All 4 musicians played on Ronstadt's self-titled 1972 album, even as they were assembling their own band on the side. They named themselves the Eagles that same year, signed to David Geffen's new Asylum Records, and released a debut album with Take It Easy, Witchy Woman, and Peaceful, Easy Feeling. What followed is one of the greatest runs in American music, Desperado, One of These Nights, Hotel California, Lion Eyes, 5 #1 singles, 6 #1 albums, and a greatest hits compilation that remains the best-selling album in U.S. history. Here's the part the invented feud story gets backwards. There was no falling out. Ronstadt and Henley stayed connected for years afterward. She recorded a version of Desperado, and Henley personally came back to sing backing vocals on her 1977 hit Blue Bayou, one of the biggest singles of her career, which reached number 2 on the charts and earned 2 Grammy nominations. In 2014, Glenn Frey personally inducted Ronstadt into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, telling the crowd she more than anyone else helped him and Henley put the band together. He called her our favorite girl singer. That's not the language of betrayal. That's the language of gratitude, expressed decades later, in public, by the man himself. What made Ronstadt genuinely unusual as an artist wasn't conflict, it was range. Through the 1970s, she became one of the best-selling female recording artists in the country with albums like Heart Like a Wheel, but she never stayed in one lane. In the early 1980s, she starred on Broadway in The Pirates of Penzance, earning a Tony nomination. She then recorded 3 albums of pre-rock standards with legendary arranger Nelson Riddle, the same arranger who'd worked with Frank Sinatra, betting her commercial standing on orchestral music that had nothing to do with the pop charts. The gamble paid off. Albums like What's New became massive sellers and introduced a new generation to the great American songbook. In 1987, she released Canciones de mi Padre, an album of traditional Mexican mariachi music sung entirely in Spanish, honoring her father's Mexican-American heritage. It became the best-selling non-English language album in American recording history at the time and was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2021. She followed it with more Spanish-language records, none of which were designed to chase a hit, all of which deepened her catalog in a way almost no other pop star of her era attempted. If you want to understand how Ronstadt actually worked with other musicians, look at Trio, her 1987 album with Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. The three women had been trying to make an album together since the mid-1970s, and record label politics kept delaying it for over a decade. When it finally came out, Trio won a Grammy and became one of the most beloved collaborative albums in country music history. They followed it up with Trio 2 in 1999, which also won a Grammy. That's not a pattern of burned bridges. That's a friendship that outlasted a decade of industry obstacles and produced two acclaimed records. She also built a long and celebrated partnership with Aaron Neville, recording a series of duets in the late 1980s, including Don't Know Much, which became a massive worldwide hit and won a Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group. Neville has spoken warmly about that collaboration for decades. Again, not conflict. Craft, chemistry, and mutual respect, sustained over time. The part of Ronstadt's story that carries the most weight isn't a feud at all. It's what happened to her instrument. Around the year 2000, she began noticing her voice would seize up mid-performance. She described it later as her voice simply freezing. Collaborators told her it was nerves. She pushed through it, releasing Hummin' to Myself in 2004 and a final album, Adieu False Heart, with Cajun musician and Savoy in 2006. She gave her last concert on November 7, 2009, in San Antonio, Texas, though she didn't publicly explain why for years afterward. The answer came in 2013. While finishing her memoir Simple Dreams, Ronstadt finally saw a neurologist about a hand tremor she'd assumed came from a shoulder surgery. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. In an interview with AARP timed to the book's release, she said plainly, "I can't sing a note." She later learned her actual diagnosis was progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare neurodegenerative disorder that mimics many Parkinson's symptoms. It had, by her own account, been building for 7 or 8 years before doctors caught it. She has said she wonders whether the illness was connected to severe tick bites she suffered in the 1980s, since researchers have explored links between certain infections and neurodegeneration, though that connection has never been proven. What is certain is what it took from her, the ability to sing, something she has described as the single hardest loss of her life, harder even than the physical symptoms. Despite that, she didn't disappear. In 2014, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and received the National Medal of Arts from President Obama. She continued making public appearances, including a widely covered moment at the 2019 MusiCares Person of the Year Gala honoring her old friend and Trio bandmate Dolly Parton, where an enthusiastic hug from Parton knocked her off balance. It became a story not about rivalry, but about the enduring warmth between two artists who'd made music together for over 40 years. It's worth pausing on why stories like 7 musicians Ronstadt secretly hated spread so easily. Ronstadt was, by nearly every account from people who worked with her, disciplined, private, and famously reluctant to trash other artists in the press, even when she disagreed with them creatively. That restraint, ironically, is exactly what makes her an easy target for invented drama. She rarely gave interviews airing grievances, which leaves a vacuum that clickbait writers are happy to fill with invented quotes and imagined slights. The real record shows something different. It shows a musician who helped launch one of the biggest bands in rock history and was later thanked for it on a Hall of Fame stage. It shows a woman who spent a decade trying to get a country supergroup album made with 2 of her closest friends and succeeded twice. It shows an artist who bet her career on mariachi music and standards from the American songbook when the industry wanted more of what already sold, and who was proven right both times. And it shows someone who lost her singing voice to a cruel, rare disease and responded not with bitterness toward other musicians, but by advocating for research and staying connected to the people she'd built her career alongside. Linda Ronstadt's real story doesn't need 7 villains to be compelling. It's a story about one of the most versatile voices of the 20th century, A woman who moved from country rock to opera to mariachi to the Great American Songbook and made an audience follow her every time. It's a story about the accidental creation of the Eagles, a friendship with Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris that outlasted record label delays, a hit duet with Aaron Neville, and a final, difficult chapter defined by the loss of her voice to progressive supranuclear palsy, met with the same quiet determination that defined her whole career. That's the version of the story worth telling, because unlike the invented one, every part of it actually happened. Thanks for watching. If you found the real story of Linda Ronstadt's career worth your time, consider sharing it, so the accurate version reaches as many people as the myths do.